Lego Star Wars the video game. Three of some of the best things ever made combined into one. Almost everybody who grew up during the early 2000s played some sort of Lego game, whether it's Lego Batman, Lego Harry Potter, or the best game ever made. But when going back and talking on the subject, nobody seems to mention the OG, the original godfather of Lego games. I feel like everyone knows of its existence, but just kind of ignores it due to there being a more definitive version. It's not like it's forgotten or anything, just nobody seems to care about it. And that especially applies to the Game Boy version of the game, which if this was your introduction to the series, I am so sorry. Lego Star Wars the video game released on the original Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and Game Boy Advance on March 29th, 2005, and later on the GameCube on October 25th of the same year. So yes, the three people who owned a Sega Dreamcast sadly did not get to play this game. But as all of you know, if you've ever played this game or even the complete saga that reused this game's levels, it's based on the prequel trilogy of films that were just releasing at the time, even Revenge of the Sith, which wasn't even out at the time of the game's release, which means that at the time, you could have gotten a highly anticipated movie spoiled for you by a Lego game. It's not even just Lego Star Wars. The movie tie-in game for Revenge of the Sith also released a few weeks before the movie. Some marketing, man. But you know what? Who cares? This game is awesome. All thanks to the developers Traveler's Tales, who before this made, they made games alright. Yo, was that Sonic 3D Blast? The game started development in 2003 and was directed by Jon Burtons, who has uploaded a few videos on some of the game's secrets, so if you're interested in seeing any of that, go check him out. But the game was made fairly quickly and was unveiled a year later at the 2004 San Diego Comic-Con event, and then going on to release another year later in 2005. It has been 19 years since the release of the game, and it has created such a huge franchise with games that cover plenty of different IPs. At the time of its release, it was praised by all of the major critics and was even nominated to be the Family Game of the Year, and yes, it was snubbed. Before this game, a lot of the Lego video games released didn't really have a set formula. Even games in the same series like Lego Island 1 and 2 had differing gameplay mechanics. It wasn't until Lego Star Wars when the formula we all know and love was created. It of course wasn't as in-depth as future entries, but I mean if you've played this game, then you know how to play the majority of the games that followed it. And while they aren't that challenging, they all follow the same action-adventure gameplay with both collectibles and platforming elements. The games are easy enough for kids to enjoy them, but at the same time, they have that charm that keeps older audiences coming back. That, along with the plethora of IPs attached to these games that can either introduce somebody to the franchise or give an existing fan a new comedic look at them, and you can't say it didn't work, because even though it was the first as of 2018, Lego Star Wars the video game has sold over 6.1 million copies, which I'd say is pretty reasonable. As I said before, and as I'm sure all of you already know, the games cover the prequel trilogy, which included The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. It also doesn't force you to play the movies in order. After the first level, you can just skip to any of the other two movies. While you have to play the levels themselves in order, it is cool that you are given that choice. And starting now, I'm going to be mainly talking about the console version of the game, and we'll later on into the video discuss the Game Boy game, because even though they're both Lego and Star Wars, boy, are they two completely different games. Again, when talking about the console version of the game, it has 18 levels in total, 6 covering The Phantom Menace and Revenge of the Sith, 5 levels for Attack of the Clones, and 1 secret bonus level, drumroll please, on the intro of A New Hope. Now, I'll get more in depth about this level later, but this is honestly probably my favorite bonus level they've ever made. But for now, let's focus on the most infamous level in the entire game, and that's the first one, Negotiations. It's very short, but it does a very good job at teaching a player the mechanics of the game, and even if it may be easy, it starts off with a bunch of items you can use the Force on, showing that you can not only use it to get items, but to also progress through the level. Right after you break down the first door, you move on to some enemies that you can use the Force on, but you can also use your main weapon to attack, teaching players something new. Moving on from there, you find a new playable character that you can use on droid panels, showing that some characters have different abilities than others. While this is a very common practice in games, if you've never played video games before, it's very good at teaching. The second half of the level is just more of the same ramped up. You enter a big room with some optional Force puzzles, some harder to defeat enemies, and another droid panel leading to the end of the level. Along this way, there are plenty of the game's in-game currency, studs, or the main collectibles being mini-kits, that if the player finds, adds some kind of reward and replayability to the levels. It's not much, but it's all this game's got. True Jedi too, which means if you get a certain amount of studs in a level, it goes. From this first level, you get thrown back into the hub world, and even though you could explore it before the first level, this is where you really get to explore the entire thing, even if it's the equivalent of 2 square feet. The hub world for this game is, of course, Dexter's Diner, a location explored for maybe a minute or two in the movies. While it's probably not the most iconic location to use as a hub world, they definitely made it work, and I wouldn't want it to be anything else. This is where you do things like select the next level, or purchase new characters, and even some secret bonuses. But remember those mini-kits from earlier? They aren't just a completely useless collectible. No, they're only slightly less useless than you may think. If you collect all 10 mini-kits in a level, right outside the diner there will be a little micro-scale Lego set of some random Star Wars vehicle. While it doesn't really do anything, it's just a cool little addition to look at, and hey, when you unlock all of them, it does turn into a, little cool museum. But if you're not looking to 100% the game and just want to complete the story, there is still a decent amount of content. I guess. Maybe. I mean, for 2005 standards, and yeah, it'll take you just about 3 hours to beat the story portion of the game, so I guess at that point, you might as well 100% it, and it's also probably why TT Games decided to add so much more content into the complete saga in order to make it take longer to beat. After making yourself at home at Dexter's Diner and playing through the first level, familiarizing yourself with the gameplay, you have the option of then playing through the episodes 1, 2, or 3, and if you choose anything besides continuing in the chronological order, then you're just a psychopath. Episode 1 will take you through 5 more of the main story portions of the Phantom Menace: the invasion of Naboo, the escape from Naboo, pod racing, retaking Theed Palace, and finally, the epic final fight against Darth Maul. Now, I don't know what it is, but I have this hatred towards the main Theed Palace levels. I honestly have no idea what it is. They're just so incredibly boring. Every other level in this episode is completely fine, even the original pod racing level, which is supposed to be hard. But just like in the first level, all of these contain 10 mini-kits to find, each along with their own true Jedi stud count, and in most you will find yourself unlocking new playable characters, which sometimes contain their own unique abilities that you can use in any level you want in the free play mode. This mode is unlocked for a level only after beating it once in story mode, and is mainly just for replaying a level for a mini-kit that you might have needed a different character to obtain. And if you're still wondering what the blank circles are on the character select screen, well, just go down to Dexter. He'll sell you plenty of others, ranging from a Gonk droid to Darth Maul, which are available for purchase after selecting levels. But speaking of Darth Maul, he is the first boss you encounter in the game, and is he a good one? Well, I mean, he's as good as it could be. LEGO Star Wars is known for its extremely easy boss fights, I should say. You just spam the ground pound most of the time and you win. Sometimes you'll need to use the Force or defeat a few extra enemies, but for the most part, it's not really a challenge, but more of a change of pace. Fighting Darth Maul by no means is difficult, but the music, aesthetic, and overall vibe is what makes it so good, and the same can be said about all of the other bosses in this game. And if you continue playing in chronological order, there was another one just in the next level. No, wrong one. There we go. That's right, Bounty Hunter Pursuit just does not exist in this game, which may be odd if you're used to playing the complete saga. It cuts the Attack of the Clones levels down from 6 to 5. The first level in this game is actually Discovery on Kamino. In this level you fight Jango Fett, and since you aren't fighting someone with a lightsaber, the fight is slightly different. Yes, you still run around ground pounding the whole time, but here, you can also deflect bullets and have to toggle between R4 to stop Boba from shooting at you. It's still very easy, but you gotta give it credit for changing it up a bit. From here, you go through the major story beats of Attack of the Clones. Obi-Wan is captured, Anakin and Padme go to save him, there is a pretty underwhelming Battle of Geonosis, and then you finally get to the gunship cavalry level. Probably one of the most infamous levels in the game, up there with negotiations and pod racing, and just like with pod racing, it's due to the difficulty. This version of the level is actually completely different than the one seen in the complete saga, and in that game it's just left as a bonus level. The reason why it's so difficult in this game is because 1, the screen doesn't stop moving, it is on a rail system, which normally wouldn't be so bad, but secondly, you also have to be a certain distance away from something to shoot it. You can't be too close or too far, making destroying the necessary targets in this level most of the time a pain. Again, it's a kid's game, so it's not too bad, but moving on from Gunship Cavalry is the final level of episode 2, and that is the boss fight against Count Dooku. And it's over. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but like, you're there for 2 seconds, Yoda shows up and oh, he's gone. The best part of this level is Yoda. I mean, look at this guy. Just look at him. Episode 3, in my opinion, has some of the best levels in this entire game. You go from this on-rail shooter level that actually works, to yet another level containing a Count Dooku boss, which is kinda worse, but is still, you know, it's there at least, to the short-lived Grievous fight, and even though this level is a bit lackluster, I do find it at least enjoyable, simply due to the layout of the level, both map-wise and gameplay-wise. Levels 4 and 5 I do find a bit boring, however. Level 4 is the defense on Kashyyyk, which kinda feels dragged, and then level 5 is the Ruin of the Jedi, which is just kinda short with nothing to do. Just like with the Naboo levels in episode 1, I don't know what it is about these two levels that make me dislike them so much, but I just do. The only cool aspect of episode 5 is that it contains a deleted scene with clones disguising themselves as Jedi, but remember, the game came out before the movie, so I'm sure the scene was cut from the movie at a point where it was too late to cut it from the game. Now honestly, I was hyping up Negotiations to be pretty much the best level in the entire game, but you know, the final level, Darth Vader, may also be worthy of that title. Especially if you're playing this with a friend, but whoa, stop. I'm almost done talking about episode 3 and I haven't even mentioned the iconic drop-in, drop-out co-op. It wasn't really marketed for this game and was more put into the trailers of its sequels, but it was still here. Since the beginning of video games, co-op has existed. And around the PS2 era, the most popular kind was couch co-op with a friend, plugging in a second controller and just having fun. But sometimes, a game would make you pause to play a second character, or go through some kind of menus, whatever it may be. But in LEGO Star Wars, just press start on the second controller and boom, you got a second player. While it's not the most advanced idea in the world, at the time, it was a pretty cool feature to have and was definitely marketable. Now, the final level of episode 3 is really where the co-op in this game shines, because you go through the entire level with this countdown, you basically gotta speedrun it to make sure you don't die, but when you get to the final section, it ends. And this is where, if you're playing with someone else, instead of the final boss being a computer, it's your friend. Now I love this addition. It switches up the loop entirely, and even though you're again just ground pounding the entire way through the fight, it makes for a great experience playing through the entire game with a friend just to end up fighting each other as the final boss. But oh wait, that's not the final level. If you ended up completing every true Jedi meter, you will not only get the super vehicle outside, but you will also unlock the secret 4th door in the diner. And this is probably the best bonus level TT Games has ever made, because it's based on episode 4, A New Hope, and you play as Darth Vader and a stormtrooper making your way through the Tantive 4. Now what makes this level so special is because it not only didn't get remade for the complete saga, but at the time was also a hint towards their next game, LEGO Star Wars 2: The Original Trilogy. Traveler's Tales has never done this since. Yes, they've hinted towards future games and cutscenes or an additional character, but never a full-on level, and I love that this game includes this. It also gives the player a little extra incentive to keep on playing to find out what was behind that door. The only issue I can really find myself having with this game is the length. As I mentioned, you can play through the entire story in probably under 3 hours, and while the complete saga helped by adding an additional level to episode 2 and some extra collectibles, I feel like having more overall levels would have done this game a favor. Like if they added the cut episode 1 level covering Anakin blowing up the droid ship, or having the fight with Yoda and Palpatine in episode 3. I'm sure the reason behind that was to not have too many boss fights, but still. There are so many missing portions of the movies in these games. Episode 2 doesn't even cover Anakin and Padme going to Tatooine. Or does it? The Game Boy Advance. Such a lovely console with such a shitty version of this game. Now I'll give credit where credit is due. There are some original ideas here. Everything about this game is just completely different than the console port, so you know, fair enough. The problem is, the changes aren't that good. I'm sure it's obvious that the GBA can't run graphics on par with the PS2, which is one of the main reasons the game had to change, but I honestly think the developers, Kryptonite Games, did their best making it look as 3D as possible. And you heard me right, this game was developed by an entirely different studio, which isn't an uncommon practice when it comes to handheld ports. What I don't understand is, and don't hate me too much because I'm not a game dev, but I just feel like this game could have been a bit better and could have tried to be more on par with the console version. I think the levels are fine. There's less here with only 14 across the 3 episodes, but some of them cover completely different parts of the movies. Just like I mentioned with this game covering the Tatooine sections of Attack of the Clones, you gotta give credit where credit's due. I mean, just look at this emotional scene. I just think that some things like the mini kits should have been added to the game along with Dexter's Diner. They could have kept the original content, but adding things like this to keep it more in line with the console port would have made more sense. I mean, they didn't even bother with a hub in this game, it's just a level select. And I know it could have been done because there's a hub in LEGO Star Wars 2 for the Game Boy that released a year later. But I don't know, I'm not a game dev, maybe they had a time crunch and maybe they just didn't have enough game storage to make new character models. Hey, you know, where else can you see Episode 2 Anakin fight Episode 1 Obi-Wan in a cutscene? But when it comes down to it, this version of the game is playable, and can provide you with almost the same experience as a console version. I said almost. This game still takes you through all of the main points of the 3 prequel episodes, and everything I said about the negotiations level can be repeated here. It does the same thing of acting as a tutorial without being a straight up tutorial. And I also think this game does some things better than the console edition. Not much, but some. For one, there are a few more unique abilities given to the characters, like being able to use the Force to turn invisible, throwing your lightsaber in grenades, just to name a few. It adds some extra depth to the gameplay instead of just ground pounding the entire time. In addition to that, there are some power-ups that give the player more force power, full health, and speed. Not much, but more than the extra hearts that you get in the console version. The last thing I feel this game does better is the NPC interactions in the levels. On console, the majority of the NPCs either stand there or are just enemies. In the Game Boy version, some of them sell you things or give you missions, and while that isn't something huge, it would have been something that made the main game a lot better in my opinion. And I guess TT Games agrees because features like this were added into future home console games. I also feel like it's worthy to note that this version of the game changes some of the lore, with things like the Obi-Wan and Anakin being younger than they should, like I already mentioned, Super Battle Droids showing up in Episode 1 even though they didn't exist yet, and Anakin growing up in Mos Eisley instead of Mos Espa, just to name a few. Very small, not important changes, but they're still there. This version of the game, in my opinion, could have been a lot better, but instead just felt like an excuse to port LEGO Star Wars to the Game Boy to make more sales. Which, not gonna lie, is the same with a lot of handheld ports. While it could have been so much worse, it also could have been a lot better. But either way, I'm still glad we got what we got because we still have the amazing console version of the game to look back on and the huge series it has become. LEGO Star Wars the video game isn't the best LEGO game or the best Star Wars game, but is still a very solid title. If you take something like the Complete Saga and compare them, the Complete Saga is obviously the winner. It took the first and second game and just combined them into a more complete experience, but you can never forget the day ones. Even though the Skywalker Saga just released a few years ago, and while I believe it is the better experience, I would love to see this game or the Complete Saga remastered officially with maybe some additions. An example of this would be the Harry Potter collection, but maybe add a little content like an extra bonus level or two, especially in a year like 2024 with no new LEGO games in sight. I'm sure there is a new game on the way by TT Games, but full-on remasters of older experiences like this is sure to bring in both new fans and keep old ones happy. Believe me, it would both sell well and be great for game preservation putting this on newer consoles. But maybe you think differently, and if so, let me know your ideas in the comments below. And let me know if you like this new Do You Remember series. I guess you can say it's similar to my already existing videos, but I want to make this series more informative instead of just giving a review. I will be making polls on my community page about any future games you guys want me to cover like this, and if you do have any games you'd like me to discuss in the future, you can also just let me know in the comments of this video. I'd be happy to hear what y'all think. So I guess with that being said, thank you guys for watching.